Good morning out there. We're in another episode of Before Coffee. Trying to wake up Rog so we can get newsin'. Hola.
Morning.
Buenos dias. My brain just forgot Spanish for a split second.
Happy Tuesday. Whatever's the Spanish for Tuesday. Very bad.
I'm not sure it's happy with the current news.
Happy July.
We're still going strong. Me and you, we're still going. That's something to celebrate, I suppose.
My eyes aren't quite open yet.
And it's a good thing you don't need that to read.
Eyes? You're so funny.
You're talking a bit quieter.
What?
Oh, there you go.
Alright, let me get the mic towards my face. And let's get some headlines. Ready?
Yep. For my
Right then.
first headline. Hundreds of thousands continue strikes and protests in France. Fears of more violent clashes with police as demonstrations against Macron's unpopular pensions policy to carry on.
Deal to buy Silicon Valley Bank calms bank fears for now.
For now.
Now.
Back-to-back work schemes in England, previously funded by EU, forced to close. Government's post-Brexit funding U-turn comes too late for councils to allocate money to keep them running.
Jumbled wreckage complicates chocolate factory blast probe. A chocolate factory exploded.
And Putin prepares Russia for forever war with West as Ukraine invasion stalls. The Russian president has managed to rally people around the flag with the talk of a fight for national survival.
North Carolina expands Medicaid after Republicans abandon their opposition. That today, plus some basketball stuff and some history today on Before Coffee, the March 28th, 2023 edition.
All right, for my first story, let's talk about people protesting, because that's about to happen all over the world yet again. Because protesting is the only way you can really show how much people care about a topic. Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to take part in street protests and strikes across France on Tuesday amid fears of violent clashes with police, as demonstrations continue over Emmanuel Macron's use of the constitutional executive power to push through an unpopular raise of the pension age from 62 to 64. The crisis has intensified because of a controversy over policing tactics, with lawyers complaining of arbitrary arrests, injuries, and heavy-handedness during crowd control. The head of Paris police has said all arrests were justified. The Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin said many police officers have been injured during the protests. The Council of Europe said on Friday that peaceful protesters and journalists had to be protected from police violence and arbitrary arrests. Attacks on politicians' constituency officers have increased since Macron's decision to push through the pension changes, bypassing the lower house of parliament. A preparatory note by French intelligence services ahead of Tuesday's trade union-led day of strike and protest said that there was likely to be many more young people taking part, perhaps twice or three times as many as on the last big day of the strike action last Tuesday, French media reported. According to the daily Le Parisien, the note said the topic of repression and police violence could focus young people's anger. Many young people at first didn't feel affected by the pension changes, but they decided to join in the movement last week, indignant at the use of the executive powers contained in Article 49.3 of the Constitution to bypass Parliament after the government feared it would not get enough votes. Authorities are expecting the clashes and violence similar to last Thursday's coordinated strike day, when Paris saw bus stops, newspaper kiosks, and traffic lights smashed and hundreds of fires lit on pavements amid running clashes with police. The French president was supposed to have been hosting King Charles for a day of pomp and ceremony on Monday, but had to cancel the state visit because of the strikes and demonstrations. French opposition and politicians on the left and right said France's image and diplomacy has been damaged by the last-minute cancellation. "We have to find the right path. We need to calm down," Bourne told AFP, saying the government would not drop the pension changes. She said that she was ready for dialogue with unions and other labor issues, including demanding jobs, conditions for older workers, and retraining. But Laurent Berger, the head of the moderate CFDT union, has taken an unexpectedly hard line against the pension reform, said he would accept the offer of talks but only if the reform was first put on the side. The government has vowed to hold firm, uncertain of how many more days of strike action would be called. Berger said the prime minister must come up with a very big move on pensions. So, okay. Everyone's angry, but we're just not going to change it because I wanted to pass the pension reform. Just me. Who cares about the representatives?
Oh, I think at least you got the right to protest there in France.
Yep, that's nothing to complain about.
They're not China. They would just shoot you. Say, "Oh yeah, it was an accident." And
random Chinese propaganda.
What?
No, it's fine. Continue.
Well, I still remember Tiananmen Squares. Built by Silicon Valley Bank. Holmes Bank fears for now. This is Stan Cho of AP News. New York, AP. First Citizens Bank is buying much of Silicon Valley Bank, the tech-focused financial institution whose failure this month set off a chain reaction that helped rattle faith in banks around the world. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and other regulators had already taken extraordinary steps to head off wider crisis by guaranteeing all depositors in SVP and other failed institutions' Signature Bank to get their money, even if they had more than $250,000 limit insured by the FDIC. The First Citizens deal announced late Saturday, at least initially, seemed to achieve what regulators have sought, a shoring up of the trust in other regional banks across the country. Stock prices strengthened for First Republic, PacWest Bancorp, and other banks that investors have spotlighted as most at risk for a sudden exodus of nervous customers, similar to the run that caused Silicon Valley's bank failure. The sale underscores that Silicon Valley Bank assets do have value, and helps to rebuild some faith in the banking sector, investors and experts said. But they also said it doesn't by itself provide an immediate all clear for all other banks following the second and third largest U.S. bank failures in history, restoring the trust and figuring out exactly what pain other banks may ultimately feel will take more time. The financial system is like a boat, said Alan Klein, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, a former official of the Treasury Department. SVB's collapse has rocked the boat, but the ship is righting itself. Mr. Metaphor. The news today is good. It's a positive step towards digging out of the hole of the collapse that SVB put us in, but the losses are substantial. $20 billion is real money, even in Washington. The Federal Reserve just raised interest rates again last week. And he said, what it does is going forward likely to have greater impact on markets and the economy than which bank could be next to see its stock drop. Interest rates have leapt over the last year as the Fed tries to get high inflation under control again. Here we go with the same old tool, which doesn't ever work other than putting poor people out of work and causing unemployment. So here we go with socialism is good for banks, not good for the rest of us. As
we
other
deserve
big banks,
to suffer.
Well, the FDIC is not, this money is not other taxpayers' money, because it's a fund. It's this money that's out in bail at the banks is from other banks. But again, it's socialism. It's other banks putting their money in a fund so that other banks don't go bankrupt. Socialism, good for the rich. Poor people, what are you thinking?
Yeah. All right. Speaking of helping people with socialism, back to work schemes across England, previously paid for by the EU, are being forced to close and lay off staff despite a last-minute rule change by the government aimed at allowing councils to fund them. Michael Gove's Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities wrote to local authorities last week, giving them the green light to spend their Shared Prosperity Fund allocations on job schemes from April. The Shared Prosperity Fund is the government's £2.6 billion replacement for the EU structural funds that went to some of the UK's poorest areas. Previously, government rules for England had specified that grants from the fund could not be spent on people and skills until April 2024, the third year of the fund. This temporary restriction, which did not apply in Scotland or Wales, baffled councils and charities and led to warnings of a funding gap in the provisions of back-to-work support. Providers of the back-to-work schemes, which include charities and private sector firms, welcomed the change at heart, which followed intensive lobbying, but several of the Guardians spoke to already winding down schemes and made staff redundant. Stephen Evans, the chief executive of think tank The Learning and Work Institute, said, "It's great the government is now saying local areas can invest in what they'd like, but they've already made plans based on previous rules, so this is a positive step, but it's too late for some projects that have already closed, and there will be an inevitable gap in support." A lot of quoting. With 5 more ESF-funded schemes due to finish in December, Ian Ross, managing director of Whitehead Ross Education and Consulting, hoped the government's change of heart would help bridge the funding gap to the next April, but added, "This is one of the consequences of Brexit and the piecemeal Shared Prosperity Fund. It's been shambolic." Shambolic.
Shambolic.
Kevin Bentley, chair of the local government association, People and Places and Board, welcomed the government's decision but warned, given this announcement comes so close to the new April 2023 date within which the provisions can be delivered, many areas will have committed to most of the funds for the year already. It may be challenging to maximize the impact of this new flexibility. The LGA is calling for long-term sustainable funding for tackling economic inactivity. And the DLUH spokesperson said, "We are leveling up and spreading opportunities across UK through $2.69 billion Shared Prosperity Fund. Our decision to relax spending across the fund from year 2 will give councils even greater flexibility to deliver what the areas need." But too late. So, socialism, but socialism next year, not this year.
Right, in AP News, jumbled wreckage complicates chocolate factory blast. Probe by Michael Rubencom of AP. Investigators looking for the cause of a deadly explosion that leveled part of Pennsylvania chocolate factory faced an even more difficult task Monday as they combed through the wreckage that was extensively picked apart and moved around during the extensive weekend search for victims and survivors. 7 people were killed and several others were wounded in a powerful blast at the R.M. Palmer Company plant in West Reading, Pennsylvania, about 60 miles northwest of Philadelphia. One survivor was pulled from the rubble hours after the explosion rattled windows and shook houses. With the recovery effort now over, attention turned to identifying the cause, a task complicated with jumbled wreckage. The number one goal of this, once the fire was out, gas stopped, to look for the victim. So with the, Pennsylvania State Police Master Trooper David Bohm said, so with that, they picked the building apart with the excavator. Yes, it makes it really hard then to try to figure things out. It makes it really difficult to come up with a cause. Authorities declined to address reports that plant workers had detected an odor of gas before the explosion. Gas utility UGI said it had received no reports of gas leak at the family-owned canning company. Everything's on the table at this point because we're still not done with the investigation. The state is one way or the other. I would not say at this point, Bohm said. 2 state police fire marshals are working to determine the cause and origin of the blast. U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, which regulates workplace safety, was also at the site. Natural gas wasn't the only possible cause. Chocolate companies and other food manufacturers must take steps to mitigate risk of fire and explosion from flammable dust produced by ingredients like cocoa powder and cornstarch, said Holly Burgess, technical lead for industrial and chemical safety at the National Fire Prevention Association, a nonprofit group that produces hundreds of code standards. Burgess said smaller particles that stay aloft pose a greater danger than bigger particles that quickly fall to the floor. Food manufacturers are supposed to determine the combustibility of the dust, perform a hazard analysis, and take steps to manage it. Each batch is different, so the chocolate material and cocoa that I'm getting from one place might have a bigger particle size or a smaller particle size. So that's where they usually need to do their own testing. Commercial ovens and furnaces and commercial refrigerants use ammonia are other primary explosive hazards at food plants, he says. So it's still under investigation. It could have been just exploding cocoa powder in the air. Sorry.
I had no idea that cocoa powder was flammable, so that's great to know.
No,
I hope open a chocolate factory anytime soon, because that'll probably explode.
Any fine powder floating through the air is a potential explosion. Your story.
Any fine powder. No,
yeah, this is true.
Makeup powder. I'm gonna explode.
Well, if you disperse powder into the air without proper filtering, you can cause a flash explosion. Fact.
Yeah, that's how they use those special Harry Potter wands. That's what
this
they do.
This happens in any factory. Small particles floating through the air.
All right.
Have to be positive, low regulated air. Go ahead.
All right. Putin prepares Russia for forever war. One evening in late December, as Muscovites strolled along their city's brightly lit streets in anticipation of the end of the year celebrations, a group of old friends gathered for a dinner at the flat of a senior state official. Some of the guests present, which include members of Russia's cultural and political elite, toasted a new year in which they expressed hope for peace and the return to normality. As the night went on, a man who needed little introduction stood up for a toast, holding his glass. "I am guessing you are expecting me to say something," said Dmitry Peskov, Vladimir Putin's longtime spokesperson, according to one of the 2 people who separately recounted the evening to The Guardian under conditions of anonymity. "Things will get much harder. This will take a very, very long time," Peskov continued. His toast darkened the mood of the evening among the guests, many of whom had said in private that they opposed the war in Ukraine. It was uncomfortable to hear his speech. It was clear that he was warning that the war will stay with us and we should probably prepare for the long haul, one guest said. More than a year into the invasion that, according to Russians' planning, was supposed to take weeks, Vladimir Putin's government is putting society on a war footing with the West and digging in for a multi-year conflict. Speaking at length to workers at aviation factories in Buryatia region recently, Putin once again cast the war as an existential battle for Russian survival. For us, this is not a geopolitical task, but a task of survival of Russian statehood, creating conditions for the future development of the country and our children, the president said. Western officials have described listening to Putin's combative speech in February with dismay, seeing it as the Russian leader doubling down on his war and leaving little room for retreat. One Western diplomat in Moscow described Putin's message and speech as preparing the Russian public for a war that never ends. Others have noted that the Russian leader, who according to Western intelligence is personally making operational and tactical decisions in Ukraine, has stopped discussing the situation in the front in Ukraine in his public comments. According to a study of the president's speeches by Russian news outlet Verska, Putin last mentioned the fighting in Ukraine on January 15th, saying that the dynamics of his army were positives. These omissions reflect the Kremlin's uneasy acceptance that is unable to change the course of the war on the battlefield, argued Vladimir Gelman, a Russian politics professor at the University of Helsinki.
Right.
This is why these articles are always so long.
You don't have to read the whole article.
No, I'm literally skipping paragraphs on paragraphs of information.
In summation.
Yeah.
Hey.
To boost the military's long-term prospect, Russia Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has proposed increasing the armed forces from 1.15 million combat personnel to 1.5 million. Despite setbacks in the battlefield in Ukraine, the Kremlin has weathered any potential backlash against the war at home, crushing the remnants of Russian civil society and making the face of the country in the process. While hundreds and thousands of Russians have been silenced or fled the country, a vocal group of war supporters have embraced the country's new direction. They too have noted the growing cost of the conflict, but are calling for greater public buy-in, while increasingly portraying the war as a global battle with Europe and the US. Yet, there are few direct allusions to the situation on the front in Ukraine, and on the sideline of the conference, some spoke about Russia's difficult progress and the cost of the war. There you go. So, most people don't really like being in a long-term war, but there are people who are like, yeah, Europe's coming for us.
Well, Putin thinks he can win a war of attrition until Trump gets elected. It's his plan. Then he can get NATO to break up again.
Yeah.
North Carolina expands Medicaid after Republicans abandon their opposition. It's from New York Times. Cheryl. They say Shelly. What's up, Cheryl? Just gave me a new name. Cheryl Gay Stolberg. In the cough. North Carolina. Raleigh. On Monday became the 40th state to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, the latest sign of how Republican opposition to the health measure has weakened more than a decade after President Obama signed it into law. Governor Ray Cooper, a Democrat, signed legislation expanding the state's Medicaid program during a sunny afternoon ceremony on the lawn Executive Mansion, days after a Republican-controlled legislature gave final approval to the measure. He was surrounded by patients, advocates, and some of the same Republican leaders who had previously blocked expansion in the state. The bill will expand Medicaid to adults who make up to 138% of the federal poverty level, or $41,000, for a family of four. State officials said the expansion will cover an estimated 600,000 people. It will take effect when the state adopts a budget, likely by June, Mr. Cooper said in an interview with the signing ceremony. Today is a historic step towards a healthier North Carolina, the governor declared before signing the measure. When a reporter asked him and when the expansion would take effect, he said, "It's only a question of when, not if." It has been 11 years since the Supreme Court ruled that states did not have to expand Medicaid, the government health insurance program for low people under the Affordable Care Act. Nearly half of the states opted out. More recently, progressives have helped expand Medicaid to 7 states, all of them with either Republican-controlled or divided governments, by putting the question directly to voters in November. South Dakota adopted Medicaid expansion via the ballot box in November. So South Dakota citizens voted to get Medicaid. Medicare is a federal old people program. But getting Republicans, elected officials, to abandon their opposition by expanding the program has not been easy. The last state where Republican-controlled legislature voted to expand Medicaid was Virginia in 2018. The governor at the time was Democrat Ralph Northam. The battle of Medicaid has been particularly intense in North Carolina. Supporters of expansion conducted hundreds of moral protests at the state capitol. In 2014, a Republican mayor of a town that lost its hospital walked all the way to Washington to build a report for expansion. So North Carolina is giving Medicaid expansion to people, a family of four that earns $41,000 a year. If you're a family of four earning $41,000 in the United States, you have no money. You have absolutely or spending it all on rent. If you can afford to buy a house in that salary, you live in a place where it might not be worth buying a house. Anyway, that's what we do for poor people. We go, okay, you're struggling, we're gonna let you struggle, but not as much. Go ahead.
Please only struggle a little bit.
And we're not gonna raise wages. That'd be socialism. Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. In media news, Jonathan Majors charged with assault and harassment after alleged domestic dispute. Creed 3 actor due to face court in May after unnamed female accusers alleged he struck her about the face with an opened hand and bruised her neck. Jonathan Majors has been charged with several assault and harassment misdemeanors after being accused of assaulting a woman during his alleged domestic dispute, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has confirmed. New York City Police says Major, the star of Creed 3, as well as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, was arrested on Saturday when police responded to a 911 call inside an apartment in the Chelsea neighborhood in Manhattan. Police said a 30-year-old woman sustained minor injuries to her head and neck and was taken to the hospital. Majors was released from police custody on Saturday night. On Monday, the district attorney's office confirmed the actor had been charged with several counts of assault in the third degree, 3 counts of attempted assault in third degree, and 1 count of aggravated harassment in the second degree, and 1 count harassment in the second degree. A lot of degrees. A judge released Majors on his own recognizance and granted a limited order of protection. His next court appearance is scheduled for May 8th.
Right.
A representative of Majors has denied any wrongdoing by the actor. He has done nothing wrong. We look forward to clearing his name and clearing this up. Major has long-term plans with Marvel Studios to play Kang, the main villain in the studio's current phase of films and television, which will lead to him headlining Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, set to be released in 2025. But instead of, maybe shouldn't hit people. So, if you want to keep your job. Anyways,
just a quick sports. The women's Final Four is set. We had Virginia Tech taking care of business last night, and they're the number 1 seed. And they're going to be advancing against Louisiana State. And we have South Carolina took care of our Maryland team by 11. So the other number 1 seed's going. They are going to be playing. Who are they going to be playing, everybody?
They're going to be playing Iowa.
Okay, so there's our Final Four. And tomorrow we'll pick those games. And then we're ready to do this day in history, and we can wrap this sucker up. What do you think?
Yeah, let's wrap it.
Okay, this day in history, I'm just grabbing this. Edward IV defeated Henry VI for the throne of England in the bloodiest battle of the York-Lancaster conflict known as the War of the Roses. That took place in 1461. John Tyler, the 10th President of the United States, was born on this day in 1790. German astronomer Wilhelm Olbers discovered the minor planet Vesta in 1807, the brightest asteroid in the sky. So you're looking for asteroid. Who's your guy? Cy Young, the American baseball pitcher, was born on this day in 1867, who set the major league record for wins with 511, and this Cy Young Award is named after him. The best pitcher as well. A man of war. Man of war, perhaps the most famous American thoroughbred in the 20th century, was born on this date in 1970. It says was foaled this date, 70. Horses aren't born, they're foaled. Okay. Happy birthday, man of war. Oh, Wilbur, happy birthday. It's a Mr. Ed. Retail magnate Sam Walton, one of the wealthiest individuals in American history, the founder of Walmart, was born on this day in 1918. So, Sam Walton, a year younger than Mr. Ed, than Man of War, and Mr. Ed, for that matter. British conservative politician John Major was born on this day in 1943. Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical The King and I debuted at Broadway as I break into another voice. The classic stage is made Yul Brynner a star and was adopted in a popular film that hit the stage in 1951. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg in 1959 were found guilty of espionage and sentenced to death for turning over U.S. military secrets to the Soviet Union in 1951. Hey, Donnie Trump. Why don't you get yourself familiar with that case? The 23rd Amendment was certified in 1961, allowing the Washington, D.C. residents to vote. American troops evacuated Saigon in 1973. The United States ended its involvement in the Vietnam War. So we're commemorating the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. Farmers are drilling a well near Zhang, China, found a subterranean chamber that led to the discovery of the terracotta 8,000 life-size soldiers in a tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang in 1974. So 49 years ago, we discovered the terracotta soldiers. 1999, Canadian ice hockey player Wayne Gretzky retired in 1999 at the age of 106. No, I don't know how old he was in his 30s, I imagine. Super old. And I think I covered all the birthdays today, so that's what happened today. Jennifer Capriati is born this day in 1976. And in the number one event that happened today, Canada was created on this day in 1867 with the British North American Act. The British colonies of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, Canada, were united as the Dominion of Canada, and the province of Canada was separated into Quebec and Ontario.
The Frenchies took over.
Well, no, they split it right down the middle. Frenchies in Quebec and English in Ontario.
The Frenchies.
You said the Frenchies, man.
That's I know, I'm laughing at myself for saying that.
That's a slur, man. Those are your neighbors.
One of my best friends is French.
You can't be slurish on my channel. All right, go ahead.
Slurish.
Don't be slurish. We're all humans, man. We all have the same parts. Go ahead.
Well, are you done? That's it?
Yeah,
that's all that happened?
man.
All
that's
right.
all that happened. All those 75 things that happened. Go ahead.
Well, that's been Allison here from Europe, talking about how Brexit is still a problem for the UK, but they still have socialism, I guess. So that's good.
And Roger here from the colonies, where your stupid King George has been keeping us down. On September. Where it seems like September, it's a 6-month difference. You know, it's basically the flip side of it. So,
the mirror.
March 28th, 2023 edition of More Coffee, finishing on time for a change.
See ya.
Be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notify buttons, and follow our other channels, Toxic Alley, History of Gravy, and Scratchy Old Records.